I wanted to start with the Trojan horses because it might take the most amount of time. And this one, if you crush this one, you're going to knock it out of the park. Like you're going to really get a lot of inbound leads going because it's the most useful one, but it's the hardest one to do by far. And so what I mean by a Trojan horse is you build something. We usually build something like a no-code utility, a checklist, or calculators, and then the list can kind of go on. But we usually use no-code to outbound to people and say, hey, I saw you're in this industry. Would this be interesting to you? And I'll give an example, but I'm going to give an example first of what that isn't, right? So one time they wanted me to run this campaign. I was like, guys, this isn't going to work. And they said, no, just try it anyway. And there was a ag tech startup that I was working with. And what they wanted to do was they were like, well, it's kind of like a finance ag tech product. And they're like, well, if we could reach out to accountants and see if the accountants know anybody who would be interested in our product, that would be really useful. And so they said, we should ask accountants if any of them are working with any corn farmers, because corn was like the top, one that could use our product. And I said, if you ask that question, a lot of them are going to think that you're asking about doing their taxes. And then when you like flip it to like, hey, I actually want you to look at a product, nobody's really going to respond. So and that is exactly what turned out. So when you're building these Trojan horses, you want to make sure that you're not doing some kind of bait and switch where you're like getting people into one thing. And like, you want to make it linear and like, they kind of know what they're getting into the entire time, because anytime there's a bait and switch, these buyers, like we're living in a buyer-centric world where really ideally they just want to go on Amazon and just buy something without talking to anybody, and we want to get as close to that as possible. So my favorite example right now is I'm working actually with a real estate investment fund where what they're doing is they're syndicating rounds, and what they're looking for people to invest into their real estate deals. And so they came to me and they said, we really want to get a cold email campaign started. And I was like, I'm really not sure if you want to do cold email. And they're like, well, why not? I'm like, well, you're asking people for money and you're asking sophisticated people for money that I don't think it's going to land too well. And they said, well, what would you do? And so we started working together. And I know the real estate industry, these individual investors, they love their spreadsheets. And I used to do a little bit of real estate investing, and I know they sell the spreadsheets. They sell them for like $200. It's like they keep them guarded. Some people won't even share them. These underwriting spreadsheets are so valuable. So then I told them, I'm like, look, this is what the cold email could probably look like. We could build in Airtable a quantitative sheet that everybody's using. Whatever you guys use, let's just throw it in there. But I'm sure that there's qualitative things that you would want to know about a deal that currently nobody's putting into their spreadsheets. And they're like, all right, what are you saying? I'm like, all right, well, if there's a Whole Foods 2 miles from the apartment complex, does that raise the value? And they said, well, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, all right, now if there's 18 Starbucks within 2 miles versus one, does that also help the deal? Yeah. Okay. How close is it to the beach? How close is it to the airport? And they said, yes, all of those things help in the deal. So I said, okay, perfect. Let's put together a no-code tool where we'll have the quantitative side. And then on the qualitative side, we'll go out and we'll pull in data from mostly from Google. It's actually a really easy Google Maps scraping exercise to pull into Airtable. And so then they were like, oh my God, like are we going to sell this? I'm like, well, you could, but for our outbound motion, no, we're not going to sell it. So then instead of the email saying, hey, we've got this really great apartment complex, it's really awesome, you should invest $1 million, which now you're coming in from like a status level of, from a cold email, that just looks like you have no money and you're just begging for money, and it just doesn't look good. But now instead, the whole outbound motion is looking like, hey, these times are really tough right now. I'm not sure about you, but the market's really crazy. I found your name in the real estate. They have some kind of directory. I forget what they call it. The real estate investors database. I found your name in there. I just wanted to know, could you give your opinion on our underwriting tool? Are we missing anything that you might know? And then all these real estate agents are like, or investors, they are all like these fiends for these underwriting tools. And then we're getting a crazy click through right now. I could look it up, but we're getting something like a 40% click through on the Airtable link. And then responses back of people being like, oh, that was actually the best underwriting tool I've ever made, which now raises the real estate investor who's running this syndication. It raises their status and they're saying, this is a great tool. Thank you so much. Can I have a copy of it? Sure. Hey, by the way, we also syndicate deals. Would you be interested? And then boom, we're flipping them into that. And so that is one of my favorite ways right now, is building these little simple things to then just to show somebody that you're serious and you know exactly what you're talking about, and then you can flip them into wherever you're going. So that's my favorite kind of Trojan horse.